Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Well, here we go again with another episode of the Architect of Resilience, where we explore innovative ways to optimize human performance, recovery, and well-being. Today, we have an extraordinary guest, my friend Dr. Mike DeBord, the visionary behind B3 Sciences. Dr. Mike is a pioneer in blood flow restriction, BFR for short, a method that has revolutionized fitness and rehabilitation, which you probably often seen me training both in rehab or just, general training with the bands around my arms or legs. This allows individuals to achieve significant results with lighter loads. So whether you're an elite athlete or someone just beginning your fitness journey, this episode is going to be packed with insights you won't want to miss. So let's dive into the science, the benefits, and the practical applications of BFR training. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mike.
Chris, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. I know we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and you've got seen a lot of your clients around the world, not just in the U.S., that have taken advantage of BFR.
Awesome. So can you tell us about the origins of BFR and what sparked your passion for bringing this methodology to a wider audience?
2013 World Championship Games, Japanese athletes in a few sports trying to figure out what they're doing. Dr. Jim Strake-Gunderson, our science advisor, one of the top Olympic trainers in the world. Think Bodie Miller, Lindsey Vonn, runners. He headed up the new doping committee and was convinced they were doping, and eventually saw these athletes in a tent, these bands on their arms and legs. Come to find out they were doing BFR, a Japanese invented technology. Back up about 50 years to the 1960s, Dr. Sato, teenager, 19 years old, kneeling down at long praying sessions, gets up and walks. And obviously he's walking on legs that didn't have much blood flow, and his legs start producing lactic acid like he was doing something very vigorous. It was very interesting to him. It took him 15 years to figure out what he discovered. Fast forward to the 70s, he fractures his ankle. He tears up his knees in a full body cast from a skiing accident. He postulates if he puts a BFR band above the cast and does some exercise, maybe he could prevent muscle atrophy. 6 weeks after they take the cast off to recast. Why? Because muscles shrink. You got to put a new cast on because it's slipping. He had no atrophy in his quads and in his hands. He was simply doing with full cast on leg lifts and rear leg lifts. But because the BFR band was on, we'll talk about why, he was able to create fatigue like he was lifting heavy weights. And then the x-ray, the ankle, and it had healed in half the time. So he had created a local stimulus in the muscle to prevent atrophy, and he created a systemic response in the body, which we now know is growth hormone and many other downstream hormones, and speeded up healing. And they figured out if we slow down blood flow, not cut it off, it's like putting the oxygen altitude training mask on the muscle. It reduces available oxygen, which allows you to fatigue easier. He then developed the KATSU system, which we helped him bring to the United States. It was semi-popular, but very expensive, high-tech. And then we'll talk about, we eventually redesigned our own bands, but they were brought up to the Olympic Training Center in Park City, Utah. Bodie Miller, Lindsey Vonn. At the same time, there were Japanese bodybuilders and powerlifters that had learned this technique. And you know this, Chris, they were strapping, dangerous wraps, but, using elastic wraps and like voodoo floss to create this massive pump or burn. And BFR was born in 2019. After we perfected it, I launched B3 Sciences to take BFR out to the entire world. And now, obviously, we have the world famous Chris Duffin, Mark Wahlberg's using them, LeBron James is using them, Chris Helmsworth, Thor over in Australia using them, Dr. Mercola. We have over 50,000 people now from all walks of life, rehab, everyday exercise, even elite level strength athletes, and it's becoming more popular every day.
Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. With pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to Merrick Health as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. Merrick Health is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merrickhealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off. Yeah. Well, I've been using them for quite some time. I was trained in the clinical side of it when that was the only available option. God, back in the 20 teens of some sort in time. I can't remember exactly when. But you're right. It wasn't very accessible to folks. Like you could really only, do it in a medical type setting where you're working with a practitioner with this multi-$1,000 setup that's, measuring the blood flow, both ingoing and outgoing, with these very, it just wasn't accessible, long and short, right? Can we talk a little bit more about some of those mechanisms behind BFR? You had mentioned the output of growth hormone, but I know there's many other things that are having an impact on both bone, muscle tissue, as well as, and I think this is more emerging research, as it relates to neurological function. I know that myself, I'm getting maybe a little ahead of myself here, but I started using those even on my heavy training sessions. And I found that I saw strength increases, not just the hypertrophy, but the neurological increases. So in my 1,000-pound squat, people could see the bands wrapped around my legs at that period of time. It wasn't necessarily like a BFR typical type training approach, which I did in the days prior. So yeah, let me back this up. Could you walk through the BFR triggers, the physiological responses like the increased growth hormone and muscle fiber recruitment?
Yeah. Well, all athletes are chasing the anabolic signal, right? The anabolic signal starts up here with growth hormone, right? It gets triggered by lactate. Interesting, something I had to relearn. We'll talk about how you go get lactate. Think lactic acid's really lactate, but we'll talk lactic acid. Then the growth hormone acts as the master hormone. It goes out and gets something really important for the power guys, IGF-1 in the liver. Elevates that. Elevates testosterone. Elevates thyroid hormone, starts burning up fat. Stimulates bone-specific alkaline phosphatase, so your bones get stronger. Brain-derived nootropic factor. VEGF, vascular. So this is the anabolic process of the body. Think build and burn. What's anabolic mean? You're building and you're burning. You're not losing, you're not deteriorating, you're not falling into disease processes. The anabolic signal. Now, here's the key. We used to have one pathway, the traditional pathway. We lift heavy weights. Why do we do that? Because heavy weights go trigger or recruit fast twitch muscle fibers. Right? Everybody listening probably knows you got slow twitch, aerobic oxygen using muscle fibers, energy, endurance. Those really aren't used. They're used a little bit, but not for strength and building muscle. You got fast twitch, anaerobic. Here's the thing a lot of people don't know. Your anaerobic fast twitch don't predominantly use oxygen. It uses glycogen or sugar. That is the anabolic side. So think, I got a slow twitch anabolic side. I got a fast twitch anabolic side. Cardio, slow twitch, strength training, muscle building, fast twitch. The cardio side does not trigger the anabolic pathway. That's why runners don't have a lot of muscle, right? The fast twitch anaerobic pathway does. Where does it come from? You know when you're lifting weights and you do a couple reps and then you feel the burn? The burn, or the lactic acid, is a byproduct of using glycogen for fuel. You're recruiting the fast twitch are converting glycogen to fuel, And the byproduct of that metabolism is lactic acid or lactate. We actually are measuring it now. That is the trigger for the anabolic process. Here's what you used to think. Heavy weights and micro tearing cause the anabolic signal. No. Heavy weights is a tool to go recruit fast twitch. You still have to get lactic acid. We now have a different pathway and a new pathway, a metabolic pathway. We'll get to the science, but we're using oxygen restriction to recruit the fast twitch muscles. What that means is you put the oxygen mask on the working muscle, and you're using a lighter weight. Now, this lighter weight, as you know, you're never going to recruit fast twitch muscle. Chris is not going to squat 135 pounds and build strength to squat 1,000 pounds. It's not going to happen. He's got to use 70, 80% of 1 rep max, right? But if you're using this lightweight and the slow twitch muscles have less oxygen, they start to fatigue. There is a thing called crossover recruitment. The fast twitch are basically paying attention. Chris is squatting a lightweight, and his fast twitch muscles are saying, uh-oh, the slow twitch muscles don't have enough oxygen. And they jump in and they help. They get recruited. You're now in the fast twitch muscles producing lactic acid with a light weight. Both pathways, heavy weights, light weights with BFR, are now producing lactic acid. This lactic acid is the trigger. Both will trigger growth hormone IGF-1. Now, here's what's really interesting, Chris. You've probably found this. You actually, in a lot of times with BFR, get more lactic acid. We'll talk about that, why that is. And if you get more lactic acid, even though it's a lighter weight, you get more production of growth hormones. So the physiology, everyone, is this. For strength and muscle and the anabolic signal, we need to produce lactate by converting glycogen in the fast twitch muscles. You know it, you feel it. We have to exceed a thing called lactate threshold. We might dive into that. Many of your listeners never exceed lactate threshold, meaning there's not enough lactic acid. But if there is, here it goes, circulating in the blood, anterior pituitary gland, 10, 15 minutes after exercise, boom, here comes your growth hormone surge, peaks at about 4 hours, then it's about gone, but then it goes downstream and it turns on the whole anabolic process. Here's where muscle growth happens. Now, Chris mentioned a different interesting thing, and I'll dive in and I'll jump out and see what Chris has to say. And Mitchell Hooper, world's strongest man, current world's strongest, he kind of hit on this too. You are training your nerves when you do heavy weightlifting or BFR. Why? Because the nerves are what's sending the signal. And the strength of this afferent nerve signal coming out of my quads, triggered by lactate, could be a 5 or could be a 9. If the signal, the lactic acid, the fatigue is stronger, the amplitude of the nerve signal to the brain is higher, and you get a higher anabolic response. So you can make claims now of 2 things that we've learned. Lactic acid's the real key, and it's a nerve transmitter that triggers a nerve signal. So literally, you could say you're training your nerves in a whole different way to turn on the anabolic signal with BFR.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. And it's interesting, lactate is, itself is a energy source, particularly in the brain when, glycogen and other sources aren't available. I actually include lactate in the form of calcium, as within some of my products. But now the neurological pathways and training that is going to lead to, everybody likes to think about just the, the hypertrophy and growth factors, but thank you for clarifying the ability to how that works on those neurological mechanisms, because when I was doing that, that information wasn't available, but I could tell that it did that, and thus I used it. So Like for me, I was using my BFR in my days prior to training, where I would use it to fill out my muscle tissues. So if I hadn't trained for 3 or 4 days and I had a big training session coming, I would do like a light full body workout the day before with BFR and really create that hydration of the muscles, pulling all the glycogen stores in there, getting that inter and intracellular hydration of the muscle tissue. Then I would do a preparatory. So I'd use some BFR training as a lead up to my heavy lifting so that it would, again, enhance my warm up. But then I used, a different level of compression during the exercise that wasn't quite as aggressive while I was, doing 950 pounds, 970 pounds, but was then trying to stimulate those neurological processes in those sets. So I tell all that story in hopes that you can articulate a little bit further some of the different strategies and how that works, whether you're doing that in the methods I used or in other ways to stimulate hypertrophy or recovery from injury.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 protocols, and you hit on, Chris. To make it real simple for everybody, you can do BFR only. You can have a session where you put the bands on. It's going to be short, and there's no heavy weights, and it's all BFR with the goal of producing as much lactate as possible. You can have a starter. A starter is you're going to do what Chris said, preparatory work with BFR, and it's really powerful now. A lot of the world's Olympic athletes are now doing BFR warm-ups. Remember, we found this in 2013, and swimmers and speed skaters in Japan, they were in a tent before competing, doing not a totally exhausting workout, but like a 3 to 5 minute preparatory BFR, like Chris said. Turn on that glycogen reservoir, which rushes in hydration, fill up the muscle cell. When a muscle cell fills up with water, that's the same thing as taking steroids. It hydrates the muscle. It's going to be stronger. And then you can do a finisher. What's a finisher? Well, you do your normal workout, and I've seen Chris do this, right? And then he'll blow up the bands, and then he'll go attack it with a light weight and go as deep as he can into producing more lactic acid. And this brings up an interesting question. I think it's a great time to jump in, Chris. You've heard of Mike Gattone, USA Weightlifting. He's the head strength coach there. I remember when Mike heard about this, and the reason Mike, and I think he heard that you were doing it, Chris, and he actually called Rick Burkholder, Kansas City Chiefs, because he heard that, named his friends, and Rick said, oh yeah, my guys are using Dr. Mike's bands. And he tried it and didn't tell anyone. And he's a little older guy, right? And the older guys, 40s, 50s, can't handle the load anymore. So he's like, man, I can't lift anymore. I can't get my strength back. I don't want to set world records, but I can't handle the load because I'm beat up. So he started using it with super light weights. And he calls me back and he said, Mike, I got a theory, and I only taught these guys one thing. I'm not smarter than Mike Gattone or Mark Vivell, the doctor there, certainly not at Chris's level when it comes to training, but I do know about the physiology of the nerves and the muscles. And here's what I explained to them. When you get to the end of a heavy set, you're squatting 335 or 415, or like, Chris, you're up there, right? I asked, and they had me on a call, said, Doc, how much glycogen's left when you get to the end of a heavy set? Right? You got a lot going on, Doc. You got you're stimulating the Golgi tendon organs, muscle spindles, and the sheer amount of the load causes the muscle, it doesn't have enough energy to push, say, 500 or 600 pounds. But what if the weight was only 100? Well, we both know you would have never got to the end with 100. You'd have been in the slow twitch. Imagine that you could have pushed out 4 or 5 more reps than you had before. You would have gone deeper into the glycogen reservoir. And the electrical amplitude, that's that nerve amplitude, would have been stronger, because they've actually done studies in Japan where they measured this. So BFR allows you to go get the fast twitch like it's a 70-80% of 1 rep max, but because it's only 30 or 40%, you can go further. And they both, all I only heard one response was, interesting. And they put it on their junior guys, right? So I said, here's what you do. Have your normal heavy days. Don't mess with BFR. Just keep your heavy days. And then on half the days of your workouts, okay, go about 70% with your heavy. Stop a little bit before, slap the bands on, drop the weight, do a burnout set. And that's 25% of your days. And then the other days, 1 out of every 4 workouts, go BFR only. Super lightweight. On the BFR days, you're going deeper because you can push more. It's a lighter weight. You can get to the end like you're lifting the super heavy weight, but you go further. And it stimulates the nerve anabolic signal more. And that's what Chris experienced. That's what Mitchell Hooper has been talking about. I can stimulate my nerves in a whole different way. And the strength coach called me back and said every one of his junior guys broke all their records. And that was the last I heard him, because, he told me, we got a secret. Nobody's going to hear about it. We're not going to tell anybody about it. But it's what you mentioned, Chris. You figured out, Chris, but probably before the science was even here, you're triggering a deeper amplitude or firing of the fast twitch by reducing oxygen. And in some cases, reducing the load, some cases putting it on at the end, in some cases combining it with your heavy weight.
Yeah, no, I found so many applications for that. And there was, I had a recovery protocol after those super intense sessions where I would sit down and lay on a couch and just kind of squeeze my legs with it ramped really high in my post-training session when I squatted, 990 pounds for 3 triples, let's say. I was pretty spent. I go over, lay on the couch, and I put the BFR bands on, and I would do, I don't know, I think maybe it was like 5 to 7 minutes of just really ramped all the way up, and it'd be flexing my quads, relax, flexing my quads, relax. And that really seemed to help my recovery protocol. And I think it seemed to enhance my strength as well at the same time. How that works, I don't know. A lot of what I did was a little bit, I guess, intuitive. Yeah.
I can tell you how it works.
Yeah, please.
So remember, we're talking right now fast twitch pathway, everyone. That's one nerve pathway, right? Fast twitch, heavy weight, anabolic signal, efferent nerve going here. Your muscles, the slow twitch, they don't talk back and forth to the brain about fatigue. They talk back and forth to the cardiovascular system about fatigue. How do you know? Everybody knows. What happens when you start jogging or running? Your heart rate goes, speeds up. Your breathing speeds up. Why? You're putting the muscle into hypoxia. You're using oxygen faster in the slow twitch than the blood can bring in. So the body, through the same process, nerve signal's going, hey, we got some hypoxia in the muscle here, coming through the afferent nerve over to the heart. Heart elevates breathing and heart rate. But that itself really doesn't do what Chris was experiencing, right? Because what happens? You elevate heart rate and breathing, and oxygen's down here, and it just comes right back up, and the body says, oh, we're good. We elevated heart rate, we elevated breathing, the oxygen's back up in the muscle, the slow twitch can keep going. Remember Forrest Gump? He went for a run, and he just kept running because the body brings the oxygen up. What happens if you are breathing a little harder and your heartbeat is up a little bit, but this drop in oxygen doesn't come back up? Well, when you put the bands on and you restrict oxygen flow by blood flow, this simple elevation in heart rate and elevation in breathing, can't get the oxygen back up. Stage 2 kicks in. The body is smart. The body goes, okay, we got hypoxia, and the actual chemical name is alpha-induced hypoxic factor. We got hypoxia. We've elevated heart rate and breathing, but the oxygen's still down here because we've cut it off a little bit. The body then triggers nitric oxide. This substance, which you've heard about, which is very grossly explained in a completely wrong way, this substance is sitting in the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. Now, we'll talk about taking nitrates. Oh, yeah. That's going to have an impact.
Taking nitrates with BFR is the way to go. So
yes.
This is the product here. We'll talk about it in a minute. L-citrulline, betaine anhydrous, arginine nitrate, and then I got the lactate in there.
Oh, yeah.
You just take it to another level.
Yeah. So the body then releases, the nitric oxide gets released by alpha-induced hypoxic factor. What's that do? It thins the blood. The water goes from kind of like oil to water. The blood goes from like oil to water. It's a blood thinner. Why? So it can move faster to the working muscle. And all the blood vessels do this, vasodilate. So now, think about this. Chris has just completely taxed his legs in these super heavy training loads, and he's got all these metabolites and byproducts of muscle metabolism in addition to the lactic acid sitting there, right? So he goes over and he puts the bands on, and he just starts squeezing his legs for a recovery. And he starts feeling, Chris will tell you, he'll feel a little burn. What's happened? The oxygen drops because he's doing some leg pumps. Heart rate goes up, breathing goes up, can alleviate because he's got the bands on. And he's only sitting there for 1 or 2 minutes, and he's getting a nitric oxide dump like he's been in the gym for an hour. He's been running for 45 minutes because it's triggered by hypoxia. All of a sudden, deep in those muscles, all those deep blood vessels go like this, and the blood comes rushing in, and then it goes rushing out, and it carries all that garbage out of the muscle in a matter of minutes that would typically take a day or two. So Chris figured out, before probably anybody else even knew it, how he could recover his muscle in just a fraction of the time. And Chris, you probably, experienced this. You probably get up off that couch after you did the BFR. You're probably like, oh my gosh, it feels like I'm 90% recovered already, didn't it?
Not 90%, but obviously I could tell a difference. I mean, the amount of stress induced from doing that type of training, which I was doing on a weekly basis leading up to my squat, was just astronomical. So it was just like, what allowed me to learn what worked, though, is I was on the edge of catastrophic failure, right? I was pushing those limits. So my body, I could tell minor changes, how it's just an opportunity it had me in this opportunity to see things that you would normally able to see without like doing a comparison study, right? And, it allowed me to see real time, like right now, this week, today, does that make a difference? Because I was on the edge of faltering or not, right? So it was, that's one of the reasons I did some of those things, is it allowed me to learn and move forward so much faster, but there was a lot of risk associated with it. Now, you're talking about the hypoxia, and I think that this is an important thing to note right here, because, hypoxic conditions in the muscle are, a precursor to typically injury mechanisms or potentiating the risk of injury. But when we're talking about it with BFR, it's different because those hypoxic conditions are created with the bands on. And then as soon as you remove the band, that rush of blood flow and clearance of that area is eliminating those hypoxic conditions, versus if I was just straight without BFR, going to fatigue my muscles and create a hypoxic condition. Let's say doing, 1,000 calf raises, I'm going to create hypoxic conditions in my calves, but then I'm going to probably sustain an injury, in the next couple of weeks from a strain that happens because of the tissue restrictions, all the other stuff that's going on, because I couldn't clear that hypoxic condition. Where the BFR bands, we can stimulate the mechanisms of action that happen from creating that hypoxia, but then also be able to provide the clearance of that through the tissue post that. Am I off in stating that?
No. There's two things that Chris is mentioning here. You've got metabolic stress, reduced oxygen, byproducts of muscle metabolism, lactic acid, tapping all the fuel, right? That's metabolic stress. Then you got mechanical stress, overloading the muscle tissue. And more importantly, where the muscle meets the tendon and the tendon hooks into the bone is typically one of the weak spots, right? A lot of bodybuilders, they get a massive pull right where the tendon, or they pull the tendon off of the bone.
I've done that a few times.
Yeah. So when you train all the time, heavy, hard, long, add up all that mechanical stress. Imagine doing that to a rope. Pull hard, pull hard, pull hard. Eventually the fibers are going to start micro tearing and actually, spraying out like that, and then they can't, knit back down. That's mechanical. When you do BFR, you're going and getting the same anabolic signal, but you're taking all that load and time and you're reducing it. So you're dramatically reducing mechanical stress on the body, the tissues, specifically the muscle, by using lighter loads. Metabolically, right? Metabolically, most people are predominantly fast twitch trainers, okay? Meaning they dive right into the fast twitch. They're 70, 80% of 1 rep max, and they're always working the fast twitch, and they don't have good slow twitch development. They can't go run a mile, right? You ever notice Chris, he's always out chopping wood. This dude's got endurance. This dude can go chop a whole tree down, and, most bodybuilders, they'll crack a couple, things of wood, and their endurance will run out. What's happening here? They ignore or they don't train the slow twitch. They don't go do endurance training. They're power lifters. They're bodybuilders. Now, let's go back to BFR. Where's BFR start? It doesn't start in the fast twitch. It doesn't go attack the fast twitch, okay? It starts with a lighter weight. So it begins in slow twitch. It's like in the beginning of doing a BFR session, you're like, hey, I'm going to go jump on the bike for 20 minutes and create some hypoxia. Think about that, everyone. You're still doing a weightlifting strength move, but you are cross-training. You're starting in a light weight and you're attacking hypoxia in the slow twitch muscles and fatiguing those. The only other way you could do this, if you took the BFR bands off to create this endurance, this hypoxia, is you'd have to go do some endurance training, which is long and hard, and most guys don't do that. So all of a sudden now, you're introducing BFR and you are creating hypoxia. And instead of just stimulating the anabolic pathway, you're stimulating the cardiovascular pathway at the same time, triggering nitric oxide, dramatically better blood flow, right? Because we have studies increase cerebral blood flow, increase blood flow in the feet, increase blood flow in the heart. If you got increased blood flow there, you got better blood flow into the deep tissues of the muscle fiber. And you actually go through mitochondrial adaptation like you're an endurance athlete, which is something most strength guys, and I've learned this, and now I've taught all these strength guys I've been teaching. It's like you opened up a whole different world they never knew was there. You're endurance training them because the bands are on. Don't worry that it's only 1 or 2 minutes in hypoxia. That's all you need. So what Chris has figured out is he can now go stimulate the slow twitch pathway, create a hypoxia that goes beyond just elevated blood increased heart rate and increased breathing to where he dumps nitric oxide. Now he's taking a nitric oxide product. Why? Because he's pulling that nitric oxide so fast out of the blood vessels that it empties that tank, but he's putting it back in with the nutrition product. So he's got this steady flow that he's triggering that never runs out because he's fueling with this incredible supplement he's got. So he's literally doubling his nitric oxide production.
Oh yeah, it's tremendous. You can just feel it, like your arms feel like they're gonna burst if you're. But yeah, that's a good time because I think it's important to share a couple stories here around how I've used BFR for recovery. So you've mentioned Mitchell Hooper. I'm not sure if you saw that Trey Mitchell detached his calf.
I heard about that.
Yeah. So they rushed him, flew him to Boston, did surgery, and then that next week I was working with him on his rehab protocols, right? Which involved the things that we're talking about here. And, you know, some similar ones that I published is gentleman Travis Rogers that detached both of his quads. And, you know, within 12 weeks.
Yeah, Papa Bear.
Yeah, Papa Bear. Within 12 weeks, you know, he was deadlifting 700 pounds and totaling like over 2,100 pounds. So in the top 0.001% of the population, when most people are returning to walking at like 6 months and 50% of people at 2 years are still in pain or, you know, limited range of motion. So, you know, phenomenal results. Now, that was done in combination with how do we amplify the effects of the BFR? And then also, what can the effects of BFR amplify themselves? So, yeah, we talked about the supplementation. So, you know, packing it with nitrates. So this product does nitrates, 2 different pathways, dual pathways. And maybe you use some other products. I don't care. You could use nutritional strategies with, you know, high levels of beets, things of that nature. But I also paired the BFR with the peptides because the BFR, so this would enhance the BFR, and which is actually enhancing tissue quality, which is really important. Then we were using peptides to basically regenerate those tissues. Now, BFR itself is causing a cascade of some of these same pathways within the body that are releasing the same things, but we were doing exogenous. But I found that BFR enhances the result of that. Have you seen that in practice as well?
Oh, yeah.
I think you can use it obviously without it. You know, I'm not suggesting that people have to, like, I'm just going, it's really interesting that people, for me, I'm bringing it up because people may be choosing to use peptides to recover, but not thinking about doing you know, BFR. And if you're doing that, why would you not add BFR to potentiate it even higher if you're investing thousands of dollars into, you know, these compounds that, you know, you're putting into your body, right? Is my point. So, yeah.
I mean, it's real simple. Do you want to be in stress? You pull something, you rip something, you go through surgery, you're in cortisol, and you basically, the anabolic signal shut off. That's the repair signal. That's the build and burn signal. So what I teach everybody is, and I might talk about my hip replacement. In 5 weeks, I was running on my second hip replacement. When you injure yourself and you're going to heal that fracture, that surgical repair, do you want to be anabolic? You want to 5X everything, or you want to be in stress mode where everything's depressed? The body's in stress and it's not repairing very fast. I've got a couple stem cell doctors. They pull stem cells out, they put them back in, right? And they measure how many stem cells they get. Now they put their patients on a treadmill or a bike and they do BFR and they pull and they get double the stem cells.
Yeah.
So they're putting double the stem cells back in because they're triggering the anabolic pathway. So what Chris is mentioning, nitrates, right? Massive multiplier, right? With BFR, it's like doubling the multiplication. Growth hormone, peptides, precursors to the hormonal pathways. Add BFR, it's like doubling it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
what I said. If you're going to do that stuff, like
X.
you should be investing, and that's what I've done in my rehab protocol, which is the most advanced rehab protocol published. I challenge anybody to find one better. Anybody can get it for absolutely free on my site, and you will see an entire section on BFR. So That might not be up. It's been, I'm republishing it right now. So depending on when this podcast goes up, I should have a full BFR training manual, as well as my advanced healing reinvented ebook. So should both be available, and you will find the BFR and B3 sciences referenced and linked throughout those for that reason. So anyway, that's why I just wanted to highlight those. All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com. That's NABOSO.com and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off.
Yeah. So, all these things, I travel, Chris, and I see people getting infrared saunas. I see people doing EMF, they're just the whole gamut. And here's, I haven't learned from the science side. I've learned from over 50,000 people, kind of like you've learned, Chris, through personal experience. And every time somebody adds BFR to long haul symptoms of, it's not use the C word, it's just say viral and bacterial, depressed immune system, right? Depressed thyroid, post-surgical, everything's just depressed. It's like hitting it with rocket fuel. That's all I can explain. Every time you add BFR to any cancer, it's like magnifying the healing, recovering, strength, anabolic process. I've never not seen it act as a magnifier in any case.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about some of the safety considerations and the practical protocols, because we've gone through some stuff pretty fast, and I want to make sure people have some really positive takeaways of like, God, how tight do I make this band? We talked about some protocols of using it at the end of the workout, or as, if you're using the entire workout, how frequently should you do that? How many weeks, and maybe is there a break? So let's talk through that, wherever you want to start within that mix.
Well, let's start with safety, right? You got in arterial inflow, venous outflow. Dr. Sato figured out, and I've seen it, right? There's two ways you can do BFR. You can do it the efficient, correct, safe, most productive way, and only modify venous outflow, okay? And the venous outflow in the arm is right here in the big cephalic vein, right here above the bicep. There's a little access to it, saphenous vein, upper thigh, right? Now, the way you do that is you use a semi-flexible band, okay? And ours, we'll talk about, has air in it, meaning we want to squeeze a little bit, but not start functioning like a blood pressure cuff and squeeze and do two bad things. Number one, squeeze enough to put mechanical tension on the tendons. You can imagine if you're going to lift and stress the tendon and then you're going to compress it, you're setting yourself up. You can injure yourself if you use the wrong kind of BFR.
And we're also changing where the tendon insertion is and the leverages that are with that as well when you do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Number two, right, you can get down there and you can impact arterial flow. Now you're getting into danger zone, right? You get somebody that's 40s or 50s, doesn't know they got a clot or a lot of plaque somewhere, and you start creating increased arterial pressure. That arterial pressure backs up into the heart. You get a little increased pressure in the heart. You could potentially get an infarction, some reduced oxygen to the heart. So here's the key. Number one, you want to make sure you use a band that's not designed like a tourniquet, right? BFR was designed specifically to modify venous outflow. Then all these other companies jumped in and said, well, let's just modify a tourniquet, right? So number one, let's only impact venous outflow, right? So if you get into a wider band in a rigid blood pressure cuff material, I've already seen the studies, you're going to increase arterial pressure. You're going to put yourself in a higher risk category. Not to say you're going to do something bad, but you're at a higher risk, right? So flexible. Number two, here's what B3 did, and I think why Chris loves it, is we have multiple air chambers. This is a patent. Nobody else can do this. When it goes around the muscle, instead of completely squeezing down like this, it's like a bunch of independent pressure points. The tissues can move around in the blood vessels. So it's a independent squeeze, but not a tourniquet. So number one, it's comfortable. I can tell you, if you've ever done BFR and use some voodoo floss and crank it down, it's not a fun experience, right? Unless you're a hardcore weightlifter or bodybuilder, most novice people, they run from that because it's pretty excruciating. But more important, right, you're putting undue pressure on the tendons, and you do that over a long term, you could be setting yourself for a pull or a rupture. And then next, right, if we increase arterial pressure by squeezing too hard, that's all you got to do. I'm putting the arterial pressure right now because I'm squeezing the entire arm, mashing the muscle tissue down against the artery. You're increasing arterial pressure. So the way you stay safe is you use a flexible, somewhat narrow, notice this isn't wide, right, to modify venous outflow. Because if you modify venous outflow, the deoxygenated blood can't get out as fast, which means what can't get in as fast? You modify venous outflow, arterial inflow, although there's not increased pressure, can't get the oxygen in as fast. You're achieving the goal, reducing the available oxygen, putting the oxygen training mask here. So that's how you stay safe. And we are the only company that has safety studies. When we studied these and measured arterial pressure, distal radial artery, posterior tibial artery, no increased arterial pressure. That's how you stay safe with BFR. Chris, before we jump into protocols, anything? I know when you tried them, Chris, you weren't real big on promoting BFR because you had some concerns.
Yep.
Right? Then you got a hold of these and it kind of took care of your concerns.
Yeah, like I said, I've been using it for years, but I don't like to take things to the public that I think that there's concern around. And I managed it from the clinical perspective of my own training and with clients that I work with locally. But yeah, I've been really happy with the B3 bands, and I've continued to use and promote those, and not seen any issues with those. So yeah. No, thank you for touching. There were some points in there that I had forgotten or not known about that you really helped me with. So thank you. Yeah, let's jump into real world strategies.
Yep. So we used to think in terms of 3 sets of 30 and a certain amount of rest. We've had a lot of evolving, Chris, and you've probably evolved too. We certainly don't want to do heavy weight with BFR all the time, and we don't want to do short rep sessions, 5 or 6, because here's what we want to do. Let's go back. We want to go attack the slow twitch. We want to create hypoxia. We want to stimulate crossover recruitment, and when we want the fast twitch to fire. When the crossover recruitment happens and you start metabolizing glycogen, you know it, you're like, oh, there's the lactic. I feel the burn. It's about how long you stay in the burn. It's not about reps. Yeah. Okay. We've learned a thing, and Chris knows this about lactate threshold. Okay. Here's the average person in the gym. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, there's the burn. Stop. That's a little, let's call that 5 seconds of lactic acid. That gets cleared in the inner lactate shuttle in the mitochondria, meaning that burn, you feel it go away, it gets cleared right here immediately. It actually gets remetabolized as fuel. And it never exceeds lactate threshold. The amount of lactate required to seep out or actually dump into the blood and act as a neurotransmitter. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there's the burn. Stop. You ever notice in the gym, you got all these people that do that, and you look over there at the big muscle guys, the Duffins over there. What do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's the burn. And the guy sitting next to him and says, now it's on. and those guys don't stop at 7. The guy next to him says, hey, sissy, 10 more, and I'm going to help you. They keep going into lactic acid, right? So they produce more, okay? So we get into lactic acid and we don't stop. We stay. You need, my personal opinion is you need 20 seconds or more per set. I don't care if it's 50 or 25 with the people I train anymore. Do you feel the burn? Give me 20 seconds. Enough to stimulate lactate threshold. And I actually prick the ear with my little lactate meter, and I measure it, and I make sure they push up to 400 or 500% increase in lactate. And then you take a little break. This is typical protocol, but you do it short. Now, why wouldn't you want to take a minute break, get your camera out, do your selfies like everybody does in the gym? Because all you're doing in a long break is you're letting the glycogen refuel and all the oxygen to replenish. You're letting the whole thing recover. You don't want that. You want to stay in this metabolic crisis. So rest 15, 20, 30 seconds, shake it out, go dive right back into it, okay? The burn will come quicker. When you feel the burn, hang out in it for 20 to 30 seconds. So I work out, there's the burn, okay, 1, 2, and I stay in it. This is what I teach all my people. And I mean, you ought to see the changes we have in everyday people when they stay in the burn. Okay, so your protocol, which is can vary, is about getting in the burn and staying in it. Now think about this, and I want to go back to Chris. Here's the average person. They're going to go in the gym. They're going to do 5 upper body exercises for 3 sets, 15 sets, 5, 15, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, right? Now, each one's going to be this. 5, 6, oh, there's the burn. 7, 8, 5 seconds of burn. What's 15 times 5? 75 seconds of burn that at one point wasn't even enough. They're not even in the burn for 2 minutes. Now, watch this. Let's go do 8 sets, 12 sets of BFR. We're going to do less. But each time of those 8 sets, those 10 sets, we're going to be in the burn for 20 seconds. 10 times 20 is 200 seconds of burn versus 75 seconds of the average person. Why? Because the bands allow you to get in the burn. And remember, you're not trying to lift a heavy weight. It's light. You're like, oh, I can keep going. So you're literally tripling, quadrupling the amount of time in the burn. So the protocol should be get in the burn, stay in the burn, short rest, go get in the burn again, right? And that can be 3 sets. It can be 4 sets. I've seen, it can be reps of 30, 20, 15. Here's what it typically looks like. First set, 25 to 35. Dive back in. The second set's going to be a little less. Probably going to be 15, 20. Third set's probably going to be 15. And then I like to do, Chris probably does this too. That last set, I like to throw the weight down and go grab something a little heavier and just maybe do a little heavy at the end if I'm trying to create a little hypertrophy. No, I'm not.
Well, that's why, like in my recovery protocols, you'll see it often paired with the Kratos, the flywheel, because you can just keep doing it because as your effort goes down, the force goes down, and you can just make this giant continuous set so that it just like works together, which is what I love about. We can facilitate that with the right equipment as well, built around the same modalities and the same thought process.
Yeah. Here's a great protocol. I don't know that I developed, but I call it 3-minute guns, right? Biceps, 20 seconds of burn, okay? Now, instead of letting the entire upper arm rest, let's go get the triceps, right? And then come back to biceps and triceps. So in 3 minutes, you're in the burn for 3 minutes. And you're attacking both of the muscles. This is the favorite workout.
Yeah, I do a lot of that with giant sets as well. So it may be curls, front delts, side delts, where the weight never leaves my hand. Particularly like the flywheel, I'll do the same because the weight just varies based on the exercise. And I'll do a giant set of like 4 different exercises and just keep rolling through it. And so I might have the BFR bands on for 4, 6, 8 minutes before I do it. It's all fucking burn. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why you get these massive increases in, you know, I used to think a while back, I probably got a little full of myself, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, thinking, oh, we don't need heavy weights. Well, guys like Chris and power lifters and elite athletes, you do. But you can work this in and reduce. Sedentary, everyday people like the people I deal with, Chris, we just, you know, we typically don't go after the heavy weights because we're not trying to, you know, be elite level athletes. So there's all kinds of different principles here, but the same thing has applied. And this is what I've learned. Time and burn equals massive adaptation. And you are basically putting yourself in a significant biohack or a mechanical advantage to create more burn. And there's a million ways to do it. I mean, I've seen all Chris's videos, and he's invented some really cool ways to increase time and burn. Used to be time and tension, right? Time under load.
Yep.
Now we don't have to worry so much about load. It's time and burn.
Yeah, there was, you know, you summarized it in a discussion we had years ago really easy. And it's like BFR bands allow you to be in a deeper state of fatigue sooner. Now you need to train longer in that deeper state. Like they allow you to get there faster. And then now let's maximize that time, right? So that's the concept. But let's take a step back from like the workout itself, but the bigger picture, or the set itself, or the sets itself, but the bigger picture. You know, I know in the clinical perspective for a long time, they were pushing like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You had talked about, you know, doing 25% of your workout versus entire workouts with BFR. If you're doing the 25% of your workout with that, how many workouts a week? And then would that be able to be cycled continuously, or would you take time off? And then if you were doing it for an entire workout, like I talked about my giant set workouts, because I don't really train heavy anymore. So I may do those where I have a couple giant sets, 30 minutes of training with BFR, and I'm done. And I could do that for every workout for the week. You know, can I do that continuously, or should I mix other workouts in or periods of time without the BFR?
I tell athletes, I'm going to teach you BFR only. Okay, these are the elite level athletes in, you know, Chris's world. Every other workout is a short BFR only, 4 weeks. Okay, then we're going to switch and we're going to do some starters. Go back to your normal workouts and do some starters. Get that real quick flush and burn. Go do your normal workout. Do that for 4 weeks. Whole different stimulus, whole different level of adaptation. Now, the next 4 weeks, right? Go do 70% of your full workout, all the weight. Just stop a set short on each one. Have those bands ready. Pump them up. Go do a burnout. Drop the weight. Go do a burnout. Do that for 4 weeks. That 4, 4, and 4, I've just seen massive amounts of changes. That's what I'm a proponent of. Awesome. Is do it for 2 to 4 weeks. Change the stimulus. Change how you stimulate the nerve that is triggering these adaptive changes. Because you're right, Chris, you tend to, I mean, you didn't get to squatting and deadlifting 1,000 pounds always doing the same thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about the amount of pressure that you would put on the bands.
Okay, so the number for these bands, we make it simple, is right down here in the bottom corner. Okay, start here, and it's very simple. Okay, if you are going to do cardio and you're 30 seconds in and you don't feel the burn, you're still down here. You're using less oxygen than is available. The bands are manipulating this side, the availability. You're controlling how much you use. If you're 30 seconds into cardio and you don't feel the burn, stop, add a little more air. So I'm exercising at a 5 and the blood is flowing at a 6. I'm not using enough oxygen. Put a little more air in, still has to be comfortable. Start again, and you'll notice 10 seconds in, oh, there's the burn. you're flipping the teeter-totter. Okay, so add a little more. Same thing. You're in a set. You get up to about 15 or 20 reps, and unless you're just cranking it real fast, I mean, you're squeezing and you're not feeling the burn. Stop. Put a little more air in. You will find, and Chris already knows his numbers to the exact number. You'll find your number, and for most of you, it probably won't be 200. Mine is 300 left arm, 275 right arm. Once you find that, what you want to get good at is very quickly into your exercise. You're using more oxygen than's flowing because you brought the oxygen down. You feel the burn. That's your number. Do not go here. Ooh, right? If you start feeling, that's your signal. Hey, it's too tight. Don't do that. You're not going to benefit yourself by cranking these things up to 500. Pain is actually a bad thing. You feel compression pain, you're actually going to start triggering cortisol. So don't sacrifice comfort, but that's how you adjust. Same thing. If for some reason you pump these up to 200 and you get a little numbness, tingling, hey, just hit the little spring there, bring it down to 150. Oh, there's my number. So your job is to manage the exercise. The band's job is to bring the oxygen down. You control both, and you want to get here, using more oxygen than's flowing. Yep. That's what gets you to the fatigue. Like Chris said, we are facilitating you getting to the fatigue with a light load really fast. Your job then is just stay in that fatigue.
For anybody that hasn't used them before, I think it's important to note that you may have to unstrap and restrap it as you start training because your muscle is going to increase in size so much during the workout that you might have to, take the air out, loosen it, put it back on. You can't just wear it the same strap thickness the entire workout because your arm size is going to change dramatically during the workout.
Yeah, and you can do two things. You can just hit the little depressor button. Sometimes that does it. Or like Chris said, you got to literally, right?
Because for me, it'll be
that tightness. You got to let it out.
It'll be tight with no air in it after a while. That's why I have to unstrap it because I'm doing BFR with no air in it anymore. Because my arm has gotten too big. Yeah. Now, but that's because of the massive pump, maybe. Right.
Here. Yeah. Most people I train don't get to Chris's level and these elite athletes level. I myself, I probably only have to do that once every 3 or 4 workouts. I'm not a crazy madman with my workouts. I mean, every once in a while I go psycho, but it's not very often. Right. But I do get that once in a while. I'm like, man, I got to take these off and take a little bit of pressure off and then readjust them and dive back in. Yeah.
Well, anything that we missed in the scope of this? We're pushing on an hour right now, and it's been super engaging. And I
think the thing that I would like the people to think about, here's what I think about. We got all these bodybuilders and powerlifters that are ignoring the cardiovascular side of health. And we just don't see a lot of bodybuilders and powerlifters living into their 70s and 80s. Chris is going to, right? Because he's figured it out. Plus, he's got the supplement side. What I'd like to see is all these bodybuilders and powerlifters, for nothing else, I'd like you to bring BFR in to have a healthy stimulation of your cardiovascular system in every workout. So it's like you are the perfect and trained endurance athlete, and you never have to go over there. You never have to go over there and worry about that. That's the thing that sticks out to me the most. When you do that, you're basically the perfect athlete. You got strong muscles, you got strong bones, you're anabolic, and you got a healthy cardiovascular system. I mean, that's the key right there to the quality of life and longevity of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you hopping on here. Where can people learn more? Obviously, you can go to chrisduffin.com and get my resources as it relates to BFR, which a lot of that is built off of my work with Dr. Mike here, or find the bands themselves, or you can just go to B3 Sciences. Or where else would you like to send people to, Dr. Mike?
Well, if they go to B3 Sciences, right, all the science is there. If you buy a set, when you see that survey, just put Chris's name in there, and I'll know you're coming from Chris Duffin's world. When you buy a set from us, something completely different happens. You get coaching, okay? I'm going to send you videos. I do a live call every week like this one. You can come ask questions. Know anybody else is doing that in BFR, right? Well, I do live workouts, and starting in January, we're actually starting a live platform. We've got our own, kind of like Peloton, live BFR workout platform. Hopefully someday maybe we'll have Chris on as one of our guest workout people. And you get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Nobody's doing this in BFR. I'm going to guarantee you're going to love your bands or your money back, and I'm going to be there to coach you live. So when you have questions, kind of like that came up here, you're going to get support. So like Chris said, just b3sciences.com. But go out to Chris's site and just dive into his BFR section. I mean, he's a pioneer in this stuff also, and learn about it. And then you're going to have access to purchase bands in there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Been appreciated getting to speak with you. It's been a few years. So.
Yes, thanks, Chris. It was great to be on again.